I have a little lineup today, and I was looking over them and saying, what's the kind of the connection between these three books? And I realized that it's not just that they've all got this absolutely killer storyline. It's really, what does the author do to get me so hooked and keep me in that story? And you will see, because I'm going to tell you what I thought was so interesting about the three books. The first one we're going to look at today is The Axeman's Carnival. It's by Catherine Chidgey, and it comes to us from Europa. And Chidgey is a New Zealand author, several books to her name, several Remote Symphony and Pet. Excellent, excellent reads. And this one, I think, The Axeman's Carnival, goes somewhere completely different and absolutely stands out for its unique voice. And that's because the perspective is unique. And we've got talking animals coming up in another book as well, but this whole story is related to us from the perspective of a magpie. And you get that kind of cheeky, observant, quirky voice that really makes this story incredibly unusual and very, very, very satisfying. So we've got Tama, the magpie, and it's very much linked to recent events on social media. Had you been aware of such things, of a relationship between a magpie and a dog? And the magpie had been separated from the dog because it was all over social media, and they were making commercialization of it out of this relationship. But said magpie has since been rehoused with its best friend, said dog, and all is well. Very similar territory, identical even. We have young Tama who's rescued by Marnie, and Tama's a fledgling, and Marnie basically saves Tama's life. Marnie has a husband, Rob, and Rob is an axeman and is always trying to win axing competitions. So you've already got Chidgey's sort of sense of humour of the kind of, the big burly axeman, and you're thinking already kind of executioners and axes and blood and violence and all sorts of things. At least I did. And they're up in the hills in New Zealand, and I think very quickly Marnie realises that Tam is a bit of, I can't remember, he or she, bundle of mischief, getting up to all sorts of things, and decides to film it and then posts a little video, and this all goes viral, and next thing we know, Tama is an internet sensation, and lots of things begin to happen, including a commercialization, because everybody, thinks that Tama is absolutely gorgeous. So the whole household kind of, which is already fragile, because Rob's farm is hard work, and he's kind of repressed frustration. You do sense this brooding violence. But the thing is that Tama is telling us this story, and Tama sees and hears things, but doesn't know what they mean. So it's a little bit like having a toddler viewpoint, and is obviously relating the violence that exists within the marriage and in the world and in the even, I suppose, in its own relationship with the family that out in the wild. What is that? The family don't want Tama back, even though there are times when flies off and sort of says hi to everyone, and they're all going, "We don't know you. Who's that?" Pretend they don't know. So there's a lot of play with what's wild and what's not. Pretty obvious, that one. And mostly with this highly entertaining, unique take on recounting a series of episodes that will obviously culminate one way or the other. And the kind of pathos that comes with knowing that Tama doesn't really understand it. hats off. It's an absolute stunner. And super for chatting about with, because there's so many interesting sort of social commentaries going on. I'm just checking to say I haven't. Yeah, look, I think I've said everything. I'm really very good at this. But you do root for both Marnie and Tama all the way through, because things will come along and they won't always, the outcomes look like they may be jeopardized. So you're kept on tenterhooks. Superb. Next one that I also features a talking creature is Small Hours by Bobby Palmer, and this comes just from Headline. Bobby Palmer wrote Isaac and the Egg a couple of years ago, and when I say a couple, that's the Irish a couple. We're never very precise whether it's 2, 3, or 4, but a handful of years ago, because I can't remember. And that was a sort of a highly metaphorical look at grief. And this is a territory which I think Bobby Palmer has kind of taken for his own, and he does wonders with it. In Small Hours, we have Jack Penwick, who lives in the city. No names, it's just the city. And he learns from his bosses, Hugh and Hugo, that's a great laugh, that his services are no longer required, that they're folding the company, and he has given his all to this job. And you do feel that kind of very focused energy he has on a universe which may have been quite confined to work. So he has a call from his sister, says that their mum, Hazel, is missing, and that dealing with her father has been complicated. So she's his younger sister. So he goes back to the country to see what's going on. And because he's also at a bit of a loose end, you know that he'll be kind of wandering aimlessly a little bit. Just before he leaves, he comes across a fox that's got mange, and which I never knew that if that gets totally out of hand, the fox is going to die. But he does call an animal welfare. They come and take away the fox, and as the fox has been taken away, it speaks to him through the bars of the prison van and says thank you. And he doesn't know what to make of that particularly. So we're wandering into that realm of using the animal as a device to allow Palmer inhabit this very strange world of what's real and what's not. And the point to this is, possibly, at least for me, was that Jack's own father, Jerry, is, you can tell, suffering from dementia. It's never explicitly said, but you understand it. And he leaves kind of notes all around the place for himself for things and doesn't really recognise Jack. But also when we look back at the history of the relationship between Jerry and Hazel, Jack's parents, how they met, who they were, what their view on life was. And they were a pair of nomads that happily, were happy to have their children and settle down. But you always feel that Jerry and Jack were poles apart, and that things they lose each other. And this is a book about finding each other and finding connections through this kind of, it's a very whimsical, magical world that Palmer creates, this corner of the country where they live, and where, as the story goes on, you realise the connections are much deeper. And the fox, comes and is obviously has a purpose, and what is that purpose and where is it going to go? I thought it was his poetics, or his use of language is absolutely divine, and has a little sort of touch of like Max Porter's Shy, where the ability to observe and make us love nature is very, very, very defined, and a lot of the detail that you get with writers like MacGregor or nature writers who teach us to bend our heads and look at the ground and where we're walking and why we're walking there and why is a tree important. It is absolutely glorious, and very different. Parts of it are very sort of dreamlike, because you're always thinking of how does the world appear to Jerry, who's kind of lost the plot of being tethered to a a structure in life, and that structure is beginning to dissipate. So will these two men find each other again? Glorious, glorious writing. And the last one for today is Anita De Monte, Laughs Last, which comes to us from Chotil Gonzalez, and this is published by Bloomsbury. Oh, I had one of the most satisfying reads I've had in a long time for a different, it was very, I felt a very meaty, juicy sort of read. There was a lot to get your teeth into. It's a story that's set between a kind of two timelines. We have Anita back in the mid 1980s, who is an artist, and I know that she is based on a real Latina, Cuban, I think, artist who had fallen from, or was she pushed out of a window in New York, and she had been married to an artist who had a much bigger profile than her, who was white, and I think, well, Gonzalez has run with this story, and given us a look at who is this Anita, and her vivacity and her passion and her outrageousness and her tantrums. But what was it like as a Latina person in the 1980s to find themselves in the very sort of, I think, frosty air, if you like, really, of the New York art scene, married to someone whose public presence is enormous and who's kind of revered in the art world and has become a household name. I'm not sure if I mean household, because he was obviously just for those kind of households that could afford or were interested in his artwork. So we have this very interesting dynamic of these two people. He is probably sort of comes across as being very typically villainous, because I think everything she does is provocative, is exuberant and flamboyant, but also she's a dedicated artist and very talented. But of course, she gets entirely squished. And then when, as happens very early in the novel, she dies. She falls out a window, or is she pushed? The story of who she was and how she tried to get, visibility in a world that was sort of pitted against her. Her reputation after he sort of looked at as being a possible murderer, gets off scot-free. There's a little bit of damage to his reputation, but he keeps on being the artist, possibly keeps on being the artist he was, but is that going to continue? And then we go to the 1990s, where we have another young Latina woman, Raquel, who is in university. Again, she's in a universe of academia, but linked to art, where she is, you kind of feel, the token person of color. Not that she's not brilliant, but there's also this sort of tolerance, sort of, well, you should be grateful for being here. And then one day she meets and attracts the attention of Nick Fitzsimons, who comes from a very wealthy family, who has lots of art installations. Mother and father have all the connections, and she sort of bathes in the glow, if you like, of his attention. And he seems to be very upfront about the fact that she looks at his artwork and says, "I don't know what the hell you're saying, mate." And he kind of, sort of, oh, is it really that bad and whatever? But she is going to want to do her thesis to please also her supervisor on the husband of Anita. Let's put him in his place and give him a secondary title. And this looks like being, that will tick all the boxes. She'll do a great thesis. But as she looks at the history, she sees that there had been this wife, and this wife had also been an artist. And at the same time, we have a use of Anita's not dead and buried in the story, if you like. Her voice is there all the time, and this kind of wandering spirit. And there are some incredibly funny moments, and quite chilling, chilling, quite creepy in that she manages to make her presence felt in the real world, even though she is Deady Bones, by kind of haunting, because she's so blinking angry that even that energy kind of brings her back into the real world and says, "You can't forget me." And she takes revenge in a way, or tries to, on Jack, her husband, and it is fascinating. I felt it really rich sort of social commentary. Obviously, we're dealing with coercive control in these two relationships that mirror each other. We're dealing with expectations of what how you should present as a Latina or a person of color in this sort of arty academic white world. You've also got endless misogyny, endless sort of social commentary on how you present as a woman, how you should behave. So it makes for very spiky reading in many ways. But Anita lasted longer for me than Raquel. Was so kind of flattened by things that I don't think she shone as brightly for me, but she really was a vehicle to bring Anita back to life. And I think Gonzalez has done that magnificently. It's a stunning read, very layered, very clever, and very, very satisfying. So that's it. I shall quit the waffling. I will have more for you soon, and you could always like and subscribe if you feel like it. No obligation. Talk to you soon.
In a dim lit corner of the Leaf Bookshop, where the whiskey flows and the blues don't stop, I found solace in the pages, black as coal, each lettering big story to console. In the flickering candlelight, my mind starts to sway, lost in the